let's just kick off and cool. So what we're gonna be talking about today, first we're gonna start with an agenda. So what's new in Coder, what features we've been working on. Then we've got several demos here, slide that just shows what events we'll be at, and then really where we see this being useful is just an open time for Q&A. So if folks have questions about the product, the vision, like roadmap, there's no questions are off limits. So really feel free just to ask away, and we'll get to those. So on to updates. The first thing we've added recently is color themes. So if you haven't seen already, you can go into the account settings in Coder and change between a light, a dark, and a dark blue theme. Down the road, we might actually end up adding more as well. Something we've thought about is if you are a larger organization, you already have a kind of color theme or a design system, perhaps you'd be able to skin Coder that way. So that's something we're thinking about. No strong commitments, but that's essentially what we'll have. And this is in Coder 2.6.0 and above. So color themes. Next is multi-architecture images. Atif, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so we provide some built-in some images like that we update and maintain ourselves at Coder.com. So we we had like plenty of images with like different tool chains like Golang, Java, but we have deprecated those. Currently, there are only two. This enterprise minimal image that gives you a code non-root user with name Coder and curl, wget, and some other tools required that are like essential for a coder workspace. And there is an enterprise base image that's a bit larger, and it provides you like Docker and unzip and a bit more utilities than the coder minimal enterprise minimal image. So they were only built for the AMD 64 architecture, but recently we made them multi-arcs. So like you should be able to use them in your templates, say if you're running on your Raspberry Pi or any ARM64 machines.
Yeah, and if you wanted to see the source code for these images as well, they're currently in the Coder Enterprise Images repo, which is all open source. Down the road, we might change this just to Coder/images, but there it is, and you can go in and look at the actual Docker files for the images. The minimal one it's pretty well explained. It's just the minimal amount of dependencies needed for Coder. So it includes curl to download the agent, git to clone repos, as well as adding a basic Coder user so the user's not sudo. The second image is the base one, which has significantly more. It includes containerd, the Docker CLI, as well as Python. So it's a very basic environment still, but someone can use this to kind of get in and start doing basic development. So we kind of designed these as reference images. We've had them for a while, but like to Atif's point, they're now multi-architecture, which is pretty awesome. And down the road, we might have more again. Cool. Another cool update that we've done really recently is the coder open command. The way it works essentially is it's a new CLI command. You can do coder open and an editor. Right now we only have support for VS Code, but it might be extended down the road to do stuff like VNC or RDP or JetBrains. And it'll essentially let someone from the command line get right into their editor and connect to a Coder workspace. So here it is opening VS Code. It's establishing a remote SSH connection. And it's just another way to get right into a workspace without having to go into the dashboard or even open VS Code. It just kind of does it automatically. So that's in Coder 2.7 and above. Next one, Atif, you want to talk about the OneClick installs?
Yeah, so if you are new to Coder and you just want to try it out, so this one-click install instructions are very handy. So they'll let you like deploy a VM on GCP, AWS. You can pick those from their marketplaces, or you can also deploy on these app platforms like Railway, Fly.io, Heroku. So you can just deploy with one click and try out Coder like before moving to your on premises or in a production environment. So these are just very helpful to get started.
Now, this one's actually one that we haven't released yet. We plan to have it out by the end of March, and it's shareable ports. So right now in the product, if you're working on a web application, say a Python server, you can go into the dashboard and get access to it and preview your work. But there's no way for you to share that with a coworker or a colleague. So that's what's changing. You'll be able to go into the dashboard and share it, make a port available on your workspace to the public or only to authenticated Coder users. And that way I could be kind of working on a project, say like a React application, while a thief can be previewing it in real time. This is something we actually had in the first version of our product, and it was used a lot with the kind of front end and back end combo, meaning some back end engineer was debugging an issue, and the front end engineer was able to point their front end kind of at that workflow. So we're excited to bring this back into Coder. This again will be an open source feature, so anyone will be able to go in and share ports. But we'll have an enterprise component of it, which allows the template admin to restrict the sharing capabilities, whether that's only to authenticated users or to disable sharing altogether. So it's kind of like a security policy setting, but this is coming in the free version for everyone. Cool. The next thing we have is our Backstage plugin, which I actually have a demo for. Backstage, for those who don't know, is a platform for building developer platforms, which is a pretty roundabout way of saying it's almost like a framework for building a developer portal. So I actually have a Backstage deployment up here, and at a very basic level, Backstage provides a service catalog. So here I'm able to see various different services that our company maintains. And what we've added as part of our Coder integration is these two cards here. The first one lets you authenticate with your Coder account, and the second one shows you any Coder workspaces that you have that are that kind of match and are compatible with doing this development. So in a typical kind of development workflow, someone would go in, they would discover a service in their catalog, and they would have to go into the source code, manually clone it, follow maybe some documentation to get set up. But with the Coder plugin, someone in Backstage can click this plus here and create a workspace that's pre-filled for their use case. So you can see that it has this repo URL in here. I can confirm my region and create workspace, and then get in and start coding right away without having to do any manual steps. So we see Backstage is relatively popular in the platform engineering space. And we wanted to create a plugin so that people can kind of see and access their workspaces. You can see it popped up here directly from the Backstage UI. The way this works under the hood is in the repo itself, there's a catalog info file. And for those who are familiar with Backstage, the catalog info gives Backstage the necessary metadata, which then renders in the UI. So for example, we have this owner PM thing here. And if I go back, that's where it's being rendered here. If this was kind of a more complex example, the tech docs would show up as well. But what's important for the Coder integration is that the different kind of settings, the corresponding template, the different parameters are automatically being passed in here. So that's the Backstage plugin. I don't know if I had in the slides, but we're planning on having that one released by the end of this month as well. Or I guess probably in I guess the month's almost over, in a few days. Cool. The next one is being able to favorite workspaces. I can talk about this one in a deep. I know you've been involved, so you can let me know if I'm missing anything. But
Uh,
go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
yeah, yeah. So this is like still a work in progress. It's still it has not been released yet, but it has been completed and merged. There could be some minor UI improvements, but the purpose is that if your workflow is like that, so you have a lot of workspaces. For example, if you are creating a workspace per branch for every feature you're working on, so you could you would want to pin some of that workspaces on the top. So we provide a CLI command and also the UI controls so that you can like star or favorite any of the workspaces and they would stick to the top.
Yeah, we
This
have
is
this
very
one.
handy in this case.
Yeah, we actually have this one in our dev branch right now, and you can see that I have a lot of workspaces, 3 pages worth actually, but I'm able to favorite these two. A little star will show up, and if I wanted to add another one, I can just hit favorite from here. We're not sure if it's going to stay here, but again, it'll just
Mhm.
show up as one of those favorited workspaces so that you can kind of keep track of it.
Yeah. Also,
Cool.
like if anyone wants to try like what we have not released, so we also publish and maintain a main tag now. So you could try that also.
Yeah, it's a good point. Let me show that real quick as well. So if folks want to try coder features that have been merged in, we work with an open source repo, so anyone can kind of see where we're at with a given feature. But if anyone wants to try this stuff early, we create, like Asif was saying, this coder preview image with essentially this will let you run the latest version of Coder, or you can just change this to latest, and it'll let you always be on the latest release even before we do a release. So this isn't something we'd recommend you do if you're running Coder in production with lots of users, but if you have a small deployment, maybe a personal deployment, and you want to try some early features, you can do that. So onto the demo, the Coder registry. So for those who don't know, we have this separate website, registry.coder.com, which has a bunch of example templates, as well as modules, which are snippets that let you add functionality into your template without having to build a lot of it yourself. So today I was going to just show a demo of modules. We have a bunch of different modules here. Some add different IDEs into your template. Some will automatically do a git clone, for example. And there's a lot of the ones here, but what I wanted to show today was the VS Code web module, which adds VS Code's own editor, but in the web browser. So we have this as well. It's Code Server, but this is Microsoft's official one. And the benefit of this, and it kind of shows here, is that you're able to use stuff like Copilot as well as pair programming, all from the browser, which are extensions that are not available in Code Server. So to show you how to use a new module in your template, I can actually just go ahead and copy this sample code, go into my Coder deployment, and you can see here in this workspace, I have VS Code Desktop. I have a terminal, but I don't have this VS Code Web support added. So I can go into the template here, WIP template. Because I'm an admin, I can go in and edit it, the source code of it. And really all I have to do is paste in the module, change the agent to the agent name that I have in my template, which is main. I can scroll down and show you that right here and build a new version of it. So I can do this all from the web browser, and you can see it's downloading the module, which then will essentially add support for VS Code Web. So the build worked. I can publish a new version. I can give it a message, add VS Code Web, publish it. And now I can create a workspace from it. And again, you can see that it's downloading the module here as well. So for those who have already used our template registry, something that we added very recently is versioning. And what versioning does is it lets you kind of have, it lets you safely use a module without there being breaking changes added to a later version. So sometimes we might add functionality or update it, but because you're pinned to an old version, you'll get the same reliable experience. So my workspace is created. I now have this VS Code Web button that shows up. If I want to see how this actually happens, we'll see that there's a separate startup script entry that's added that has VS Code Web. It's downloading it and it started running it. And I can click into it. And we'll see that very similar to Code Server, I get VS Code in the web browser, but the fun part is I can install stuff like Copilot and do pair programming there. So let me just do a demo of me using Copilot real quick, just because it's pretty fun and easy. Copilot's installed. I can sign in real quick. Do this device activation thing. Create a Python file. Oop. Open this Python file, and now I can start using Copilot. So I can say, like, do a for loop, and it's works. I can use Copilot inside of Coder in the web browser. So that's the registry. We also have sample templates in here as well, which I kind of brushed over, which is just different full example templates that you can use, and you can go in and it just gives you the full template and you can copy and bring into a template editor. One module I wanted to point out that is super interesting is the slackme module. The way this module works is very similar to the way GitHub authentication works. Once you add this module in, users will be prompted to link their Slack accounts. Then in the terminal, they can run the command slackme before any command that they're running. So such as slackme make build, it'll kick off that command as normal. But the main advantage here is the developer can go on to another task and get a notification in Slack when that command is completed. So typically this would be something someone would have to have up in another window. They have to keep checking on. Maybe someone would take a coffee break. But at Coder, our tagline is keep developers in flow. So this is just one small way that developers can kind of maintain their flow. They can run slackme, move on to something else, and then get a notification when it's done, so they don't have to keep checking and waiting on it. So this is another thing that you can go into a registry and check out. The next thing we want to talk about is external provisioners. So this is a feature we've actually had for a while. It's not something that's new, but it's something that's not used as widely. So what an external provisioner is, how would I go back to the slide and explain it for a second? What an external provisioner is it's the actual process that runs a Terraform apply. So for those who have used Coder before, you know that templates are written in Terraform. I did a demo earlier with the registry where I copied in a module. The external provisioner is the one that actually does the Terraform apply and sends the logs to the Coder server. When you install Coder, the Coder server comes with 3 of these provisioners running as part of the Coder server. But there are some advantages to running it as a separate process and even running it on a separate machine. So some of those advantages are like secure build environments, meaning it essentially limits the attack area of a malicious template. For example, if they're running in an isolated environment, maybe another virtual machine. It's also a way to isolate different APIs. So in Atif's example where he had LXD, if the Coder server was running on a different machine than the LXD machine, he kind of had 2 options. One, he could expose the full LXD API to the internet or to some internal network that Coder could access. Or the second is to run an external provisioner on that LXD machine. The third is very similar, which lets you isolate secrets, meaning the Coder server doesn't necessarily need a token to access the Kubernetes API, for example. It doesn't need access to another cloud. All those things are just given to each individual provisioner on the cloud. And the fourth, which is also like pretty important, is it reduces server load. You can imagine if you have a Coder deployment with hundreds of users, you don't want to be limited to only 3 provisioners, which means if you're doing a hackathon, for example, and 100 people are creating a workspace at once, they have to wait for 3 workspaces to be created at any given time, where you could actually take and run these external provisioners somewhere else, both to decrease load from the original Coder server and 2, to give people the ability to kind of create more than 3 workspaces at a time. One thing that I also wanted to mention is up until this point, and actually still at this point, external provisioners is an enterprise feature. However, we're going to be making external provisioners available for only 2 provisioners as part of our open source edition as well. We had a demo prepared, but I think it's part of that same environment that you have at TIFF that has the terminal working. So if you're all right with it, I think we can skip over that part.
Yeah, I can show like how an example to how they can easily run a
Yeah.
external provisioner. Yeah, I can show that. So I can show that I have a VM that's an ARM64 VM. So you can see that here. So it's an ARC64 architecture, and I want to create Docker containers that are actually ARM64. So what I did was I ran I ran a Coder external provisioner on this machine, and I installed Docker on this machine. So for that, I only needed this like a Docker compose file, and it's an image, and everything is same as a normal uh, Docker Compose file to provision Coder using Docker Compose, but you just need to change the entry point. It's now Coder Provisioner D start instead of Coder server. And we need to set these 3 environment variables. So one is the Coder URL of your Coder D. It could be like on internet or your internal network on anything. And you need a Coder Provisioner daemon, like a pre-shared key. Like this should exist on the Coder D. So the Coder matches this to authenticate the external provisioner to talk to Coder and some Coder provisioner tags. So we use these tags to match a template with a provisioner. So if a template have this tag arm64, that template will come to this provisioner. So this is that simple. And now I'll show you I have a template. Okay, so I have this Docker ARM containers template, and I'll show you source code. So this is just our starter Docker template. I didn't change anything, even a single line in this template. And it just have this provider Docker that doesn't have any remote host or anything, because by default, the Docker Terraform provider uses the local Unix socket uh, of the Docker. So, but we have one thing. So we have these provisioner tags. I added this tag arc is equal to arm64. So we can add these tags here and thus build. So what this does is that it allows us to create a workspace, and on that machine where I showed you, I run an external provisioner. So it will give us an ARM64 Docker container on that, on a different machine, on a different architecture. So external provisioners can be used uh, for use cases like that. Okay, I think this is enough. So I'm not sure if the terminal will work in this one, but let's see. Yeah,
More
it
promising.
started. Yes. No, no. Yeah.
Yeah, the next thing I wanted just to touch on before we get into Q&A is just upcoming events. We're doing quite a lot of travel. The most recent one is, or the most upcoming one is actually this Friday, I believe, which is FOSDEM in Brussels, Belgium. I won't be there, but a lot of the engineering team will. So the folks who actually worked on favorite workspaces will be there. And, it's a good place to kind of chat with the team and get feedback. Um, Scale is one in the Los Angeles area. I'll be there in Pasadena, California. Sivo is in Austin, Texas. I won't be there, but some of the team will. We'll also be at Developer Week in San Francisco and in KubeCon EU in Paris, France. Cool. So with that, wanted to give some time for Q&A. See if folks in the chat had any questions we can answer about the product, the roadmap, any of the features we showed. Oh yeah, Marco asked a question. Is there a way to limit disk space using LXD? Um,
Yeah. There could be, like, I'm not an LXG expert, but there could be. So this we basically did this use case for the people like who are like already using LXG. So how they can integrate that with Coder to provision their dev environments on LXG on LXG system or LXG. Yes. So there could be. I'm not sure.
for those like tuning in, we plan on doing this monthly. The next one, I think we're going to try to relate to a Coder release, so we can talk about what's coming up new in the release, what to expect, kind of ways to get feedback there. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and until next time.